Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
We need to. We got to stop wobbling this table because we've been wobbling the camera. We can come in.
Elbows off.
Elbows off. You, with your amazing voice, you didn't need to come so close to the microphone. So let's set the scene. I think Danny's going to join in a little bit of this.
Oh, good.
Even though it wasn't even a dinner, because so to anyone listening, me and Harry made a show the other day, and then afterwards we went for dinner. And we just went down this rabbit hole of a conversation. We're like, no, that's the fucking show we should have made. So we're back recording. The other one is going to go into the dumpster fire. We'll do that another day. But so let's set the scene. You mentioned you said Bitcoin's a black hole.
Yes.
And I was like, no, I think Bitcoin is the singularity, which is kind of the same thing. Mm-hmm. I think like it's two concepts. Bitcoin is the black hole, but there is a singularity.
And full disclaimer. Neither of us are physicists. And so we're going to butcher some physics concepts today.
How the fuck do you know I'm not a physicist?
Visually.
I got a C in physics.
You're too good looking.
I got a C in physics at school. I was shit. But I am a bit of a space nerd. So I listen to, I think his name's Matthew Sutter. He's got a thing called Ask a Spaceman. He's like, it's like the what Bitcoin did version of astrophysics. He does it for dumbasses. And it's amazing. I watch every space documentary. I just watched the one on it was on Netflix where they were trying to photograph the black hole.
Yeah,
amazing.
That was really good.
So you said Bitcoin is a black hole. I was like, Bitcoin is the goal is the singularity. I assume if we Google this, somebody else has probably already come up with this concept and written about it. If they haven't, you should do it. But I felt like this is really an interesting conversation. Do you want to give the background to, because you'd obviously been thinking about it.
Yeah. And so, the origin of this for me was I spent a lot of time recently thinking about what is Bitcoin's actual core innovation. And we hear words like double spend problem and Byzantine generals problem, but that's not actually the core innovation. That's the outcome from the innovation. And so, I did a tweet, that said that the difficulty adjustment plus proof of work is the innovation, and I've been workshopping that and thinking through that idea more and more, and Gigi has done a lot of thinking around Bitcoin is time, and a lot of these concepts, and Peter Taz worked on the Open Timestamps project, and I think there's a time leg to this, but the unlock for me was the ability to say that Bitcoin tethers itself to physics in two different ways. Proof of work is the digital representation of the physical world. It's energy. And the difficulty adjustment is the representation of time, because we cannot deviate from the target of an average block time of 10 minutes. And so the combination of the tether to the physical world and the tether to time in tandem has solved the Byzantine generals problem, has solved the double spend problem, has solved all of these sort of more of the computer science component of the project. But it's really those two core innovations, first and foremost, that has allowed Bitcoin to be an order of magnitude or multi-order of magnitude improvement on some of the existing technology stack. And that's, for me, why it starts to look like a black hole.
Right. Okay. Let's go back a step. Let's make an assumption there's some people listening who won't know what we're talking about. Some people might have not gone down the rabbit hole. They might have heard of proof of work. They might have heard of the difficulty adjustment. But let's explain what each of those are as simple as possible so people get a grip, and why, as an innovation, they're so important.
Yeah. So proof of work, we have Adam Back to thank for inventing that. And it preceded Bitcoin. It was the innovation that the contribution of computing power to a network is the mechanism by which the cryptography is validated. So what do we mean by that? Bitcoin is encrypted. That means that that the SHA-256 algorithm that governs the discovery of new blocks uses what's called a one-way hash function, and that means that you put one thing in and something else comes out the other side of the hash machine, and the ability to trace back what came out is not there. So there's the reason that Bitcoin works is that it's very secure. So you are required to have the private key in order to spend the UTXO. all of this kind of comes together and works because of a combination of the cryptography around the actual wallet, but then also the security around the hashing function of discovery of new blocks.
Okay.
So there's two security concepts there.
Okay. And that's proof of work, but talk about the actual proof of work in terms of unforgeable costliness and why that's important. Because at the moment, Ethereum, an alternative cryptocurrency that some people are in favor of, some people think it's a bit of shit, is migrating from proof of work to proof of stake.
Yeah. So proof of work and proof of stake are important to understand when you think about money technology. What proof of work does is it sinks energy into the system, and there's no getting it out once you've sunk it in. So what do miners do? They plug in a ton of servers. Those servers consume a tremendous amount of electricity, and they put their computing power into the effort of discovering new blocks and earning Bitcoin revenues. Once that energy is spent and once those blocks are discovered, there's no getting it back. And so the incentive structure around proof of work is such that the good behavior of the miners isn't insured, but it's game theoretically incentivized. And so all the miners are spending the money on construction of their mines and spending money on moving the dirt and digging in the ground and buying the servers, and then they're spending the money on the energy every single month. And so there's this enormous sunk cost into the activity of discovering new Bitcoin blocks, because it's very, very valuable in order to get your hands on new Bitcoin. And so there's this enormous game theoretic incentive to continue to behave well, because the only way you're going to get any value out of those proof of work servers is to continue to support Bitcoin and to continue to generate Bitcoin revenue. So there's this enormous industry, many, many, many billions of dollars in today's purchasing power that are contributed to the activity of securing the Bitcoin network through the constant spend into energy, constant spend into new servers. I mean, this is incredibly high value activity because, and we can go into why all these business models are exciting, but it's an incredibly high value activity because each new block continues to affirm the security of all the past blocks. And so there's this incredible cumulative effect that's happening, and it's exogenous to Bitcoin. So the burning of the time and the expenditure into the energy is a sunk cost. It's exogenous to Bitcoin. Whereas if you look at a proof of stake environment and why that's different, the quote unquote sunk cost is endogenous to the alternative system. It's inside the system. So the people who own the most of the token get to make the rules and get to determine how much of the token gets moved.
Sounds like the current central banking system.
Precisely. So proof of stake is this stakeholder concept. So your ownership percentage equals your influence. In Bitcoin, we've severed that relationship. So whether I own 1 Bitcoin or 1 million Bitcoin, my ability to influence the system is unchanged. That's an incredibly, incredibly asymmetric difference in how the system functions and how the incentives are aligned. So, just by running one node, you have an equivalent voice within the Bitcoin ecosystem relative to a different node, regardless of how many UTXOs are owned by that node holder. And so this is the social component of this, where we talk about rough consensus. We talk about these ideas around the Bitcoin network and the Bitcoin users governing the software. Those are the people who have leveled the playing field with each other, rather than rewarding those who own the most.
And with proof of stake, we should say that Ethereum came with a significant pre-mine,
yes,
which was distribution of tokens to people involved in the project. In a scenario of proof of stake, they've established the monetary policy, they've distributed a large amount of tokens to themselves, and now they benefit most from the issuance of new coins and control of how the system goes. I see how someone could argue that they've essentially established a blockchain-based kleptocracy.
So I'll tell you a brief story about the summer of 2020.
Okay. When
I was in a clubhouse room that was screaming about Bitcoin and Ethereum, and everyone was arguing with each other. And I think it was American Hodl who was speaking at the time, and he sort of ran through exactly what you said. He said, well, there's this huge pre-mine, and now the large holders of the token are introducing rules that make the large token holders the rule makers and the deciders of how everything works. And there was, a kid who had to be probably 19 or 20, who was a big Ethereum, maxi. And he was like, wait, that's how it works? and so it was clear that, he'd come into Ethereum later, hadn't understood kind of the history, the DAO, the mechanisms at play, across that historical context, and was in this room with a bunch of toxic maximalists who showed him kind of, this is what the system that you're assigning your time to. Because at the end of the day, money is a representation of your life. It is your time. And I think his eyes were open to this idea that maybe the system that he was opting into didn't deliver on the value proposition that he expected. It was very shocking and very challenging for him, but ultimately positive, because he was able to understand that Bitcoin by design does not function that way. It does not reward, economies of scale to the large holders.
Yeah.
It is a naturally centralizing force within an ecosystem that purports to be decentralized. Proof of stake is fundamentally centralizing and fundamentally untenable on any long-term basis to support any kind of positive sum economy.
And people will talk about fair distribution. You can't have equality in distribution, but you can have a fairer model. And the distribution of coins via proof of work is the fairest that we have. It's the fairest consensus mechanism we have, because you have to work for the coins, whereas in a proof of stake system, it's less fair because you don't have to work.
Yeah, I think that this goes back to this idea of exogenous versus endogenous.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is a fully exogenous from inception ecosystem, and I think there's a bit of an immaculate conception thing happening for Bitcoin as well, where the being the first fully proof of work, fully maybe not, it wasn't decentralized the first day, but progressively decentralized open network with fair distribution. I think that with each subsequent attempt at, I think back to like Griid was a quote unquote fair launch coin. And so, what we found is that simply by not being first, the ability to overtake Bitcoin's decentralization of coin distribution is not possible.
And I think one of the outputs of this is going to be, we have the merge coming for ETH soon. It is moving to proof of stake. I think if ETH people really talked about it, thought it through, they would understand and agree that the consensus mechanism of Ethereum and proof of stake is not as fair. It's not as good as proof of work, which means they're probably going to use a different angle to attack Bitcoin, like the Ripple guy recently, which is to make out that Ethereum and proof of stake is energy efficient, whereas Bitcoin isn't. And I think we should just routinely tell these people to kind of eat a dick and fuck off, because but I think that's going to be a regular hit.
It already has been. It will continue to be. I will pound the table in every venue that lets me to tell the world, number one, is that the energy that we consume is positive sum, because it's energy that is not being consumed efficiently or advantageously in the markets that we're participating in.
Not always, but generally in trending that way. It's not every, like, if we're going to be fair, there are people who they're using other energy, or they're creating energy.
100%. But there's a reality within energy markets in the US and elsewhere that the contractual mandate of utilities is reliability and uptime. Reliability, redundancy, and uptime. Those are the mandates for the utility. So what does that mean? They're heavily incentivized to overproduce electricity regardless of how many customers they have. So the ability to generate energy in the US is greater than the average consumption, because we've got to build an entire system designed around the high point.
Yeah. And we also covered this. We'll get Danny to put it in the show notes. In the previous time we covered it. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about the difficulty adjustment. And I don't know the background to this. Was this a fluke?
No, the difficulty adjustment is like Satoshi's key insight. into how Bitcoin was designed.
Right.
This is like the incredibly critically important piece of Bitcoin's design, game theoretic design, is that on average every 2 weeks, I'll need to think.
Is it 2048 blocks?
No, 2016 blocks.
2016 blocks. I want to say 2040.
I was going to say 2048.
I better check.
Every 2016 blocks, the difficulty adjustment happens, and what that means is that the amount of hash over the previous period dictates how hard it is to look for new blocks over the next difficulty period. So let's say that there's 10 computers looking for blocks in period 1. And then we get to period 2 and 5 more join the network. And I'm using very basic numbers. So we're at 15. So the next time, then for the first 2016, there's no change. For the second 2015, the difficulty adjustment would move up 50% to true up to continue to have on average 10-minute block times. And so let's play out why this is so important. Imagine that we have an incredible new innovation in energy, and we are able to bring on an energy source that is 10 times more efficient than what we have today. I would expect Bitcoin mining to go up 10 times because I'm able to consume 10 times more energy for the same cost. And so therefore, I would expect an enormous amount of hash to come onto the network. The difficulty adjustment ensures that we can't accelerate Bitcoin blocks over time in any kind of significant and material way.
And we don't want to as well.
Absolutely not. We want to have average block times of 10 minutes because that means that the issuance schedule is happening over the time period that we expect it to. It's the internal metronome of the system.
By the way, tell me if you already know this question. I only want somebody who doesn't know the answer to answer it. But it was Charlie Lee put out a tweet once, and he said, if a block has been found and 9 minutes has passed, how long will it be till the next block is found?
I know the answer.
Do you know the answer?
Mm-hmm.
What would you think it would be?
I mean, it would still be 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, it's always 10 minutes. Did you know that?
Yeah, this is if I flip a quarter and it turns up heads, what's the likelihood that my next coin flip is going to be heads?
It's the same.
It's the same.
Yeah.
And so that's this is the beautiful innovation that the SHA-256 hashing algorithm is that it is a purely probabilistic environment.
I mean, I obviously said 1 minute, of course,
because you got to see in physics.
And Charlie was like, "No, it's 10 minutes." I was like, "But it can't be." He's like, "No, it is." And then he explained a bunch of mumbo jumbo, and I was like, "Okay, fine, I trust you." So, anyway, where's a ball? Okay, so those two create the black hole.
Exactly. And so this in the same way that that Moore's law in the 1950s doesn't look like anything super important is happening. It's just the very beginning of an exponential innovation.
Where does the 21 million come into that? Is that a third thing, or is it they maintain the 21 million?
So this is my opinion. It's not Bitcoin gospel yet, but it's that because we have proof of work and the difficulty adjustment, and therefore the halvings, and therefore the monetary policy, all of that happens downstream. Okay. If you don't solve for those first two elegant design problems, you don't get to enforce the monetary policy.
I'm just working this one through. If you don't have the difficulty adjustment, you can still enforce the 21 million, but it might happen quicker. I still think you get to maintain it.
You'd be able to say, I'm not willing to utilize it, but I think that the monetary policy is an arbitrary innovation.
Okay.
These are fundamental innovations.
Fine. Okay. Anyway, I work with you, but the black hole still requires 20. It doesn't require 21 million. It requires a fixed. Yeah, it requires a hard cap because that changes the dynamics of money that we have right now,
and in all time in history.
Yes, and the features you get from Bitcoin are the reason Bitcoin becomes the best form of money. I mean, Didn't you say the other night though? It's not money.
Bitcoin is software.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, in the same way that gold is not money, gold is an element. Gold is chemistry.
Okay, but where does money come into this?
Money is the humanness that gets
Okay.
applied to the software.
Fine. I think the 21 million hard cap is important for it to be the black hole as well. To get to the singularity, because it changes, going back to my interview with Jeff Booth, in that when you have the ability to control the spigot, to print money, you distort money. Therefore, you distort markets. Therefore, you distort people's earning potential. You distort their purchasing power. You distort their decisions. Everything gets distorted.
Yes.
Whereas with a fixed cap, everyone and a fixed issuance, everyone knows the rules and everyone plays the rules. It goes from top down to bottom up.
Yes.
Top down, bunch of guys in a room, try and make a decision that has this kind of butterfly effect for everybody else. Bottom up, you know the rules, is how you choose to navigate that.
I totally agree. I think the butterfly effect is the right way to think about fiat first, which is just that we don't understand. Janet Yellen came out yesterday and she said, didn't really get it. Sorry, missed this one.
Yeah. Thanks for paying me $250,000 to come and speak at every dinner, but I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Correct.
Whereas every Bitcoiner for the last 2 years has been saying, if you increase the money supply, we're going to get inflation.
Of course.
Is she stupid or a liar? Either way, she shouldn't be in her job.
But either way, that job is the problem. She's not the problem. The fact that we have a treasury secretary who has the levers of power that are so large and all encompassing is the problem. I think that, I'm reluctant to say that that the bureaucrats are bad. I'm very willing to say the bureaucracy is bad.
Yep. Fair.
And so, this is the problem with having, to me, it's like a total false sense of control, right? We think that, the economists, if they just tweak this little lever, the economy will work again. Like the economy is not a combustion engine where you change a fan belt and it starts or stops. The economy is a large, complex, multivariate, emergent social phenomenon. And because of that, when you poke one side of the bear, you don't know how it's going to react. And it's an incredibly volatile and incredibly complex, place to try to play God. And so the best choice is not to do it.
So is it a neutron star which explodes that creates a black hole, and then it collapses in on itself? Yeah. So that creates the black hole, our rabbit hole. Essentially, Satoshi releasing the protocol created the black hole, and it's a small black hole.
Yes.
That how discovered.
Yeah.
And then a few others discovered. But the black hole is for me, it has its event horizon. Most people, when they crossed it, they don't leave. You're in, I'm in, Danny's in, Jeremy's in, we're in. But we have to cross the event horizon. And I think we kind of skirt around the edge of it a little bit to begin with. Or we see the black hole. We're like, I'm not going to go near that shit. I don't know what the fuck that's all about.
Yeah, well, I think that, we can extend the metaphor pretty far and
Massive.
say, that let's just say that we're on Earth and we've got a telescope and we're looking up at the sky. And we don't see the black hole at first. All we see is an absence. And we go through this sort of this astronomy phase where we're comfortable where we are. We're looking up. We're curious. We're not sure what's out there. And the black hole is not the obvious point. You go and you look at the brightest star. You go and look at the nearest planet. You go and look at all these other things that are very apparent to the naked eye. And at the beginning, the black hole is just an absence. And then the absence gets very interesting over time. And you've got to keep looking, but you've got to engage with this new behavior, which is looking up at the sky, which is thinking about what does it mean to be an owner of my financial future? What does it mean to think about my time and think about my life in a critical way that lets me have a better outcome? And maybe that starts with me saying, best thing I can do is invest in the S&P 500 in my 401k. That's like the first, that's the baby step that is sane and rational and validated through my social environment and supported by my employer. And it's a way for me to take ownership of my future, because one day I want to retire. So, you look up and you see Mars. But over there, further away, is the absence in the sky. And over time, some people will get pulled to that place that isn't the easy, close, bright one. It's the further, less obvious absence that ends up becoming the most important force of nature in the broader universe.
I like the idea of the singularity as well, because in my mind, Bitcoin eats everything eventually. And we're seeing that. I've talked about it on the show a lot. We have our Bitcoin, I'm going to kind of end up quoting Donald Rumsfeld here, but we have our known knowns.
Yeah.
Our unknown knowns, or known unknowns, and our unknown unknowns. So our known knowns right now is the best form of money. It's 21 million hard cap. It's censorship resistant. It's permissionless.
Yes.
No one can fuck with my Bitcoin. My known knowns, I learned that very on. It's the unknown unknowns. The first most important one for me is everything that's happening with mining. Everything we've talked about in our previous shows, what they're doing down at ERCOT, what's happening when you're talking about given the ability to build out energy infrastructure because miners can take off the excess load. It's the ability to use gas flaring to protect the environment. There is, again, I have to refer back to Hal. Apart from Hal tweeting out like 12 years ago, I wonder what Bitcoin mining can do for the environment, which is fucking weird, man.
Time traveler.
Apart from that, like generally speaking, 4 years ago, nobody was talking about this shit. I didn't hear it. And now it's all happening. And there's going to be other things like that. That's the unknown unknowns. But the singularity is at the point where it's eating everything. It's eating every industry. It's the Bitcoin standard. Everything is, well, Bitcoin is a unit account for everything.
Yeah, I think that's where that is certainly the potential that it has for all of us. I'm always hesitant to try to explain how a big system is going to behave. I'm not a macro guy. I'm just one person making their own decisions day in and day out. And so the questions I ask myself around this are, what else would I rather own? What else would I rather be using? I'm very hesitant to say that there's anything else that I'm interested in owning other than, working hard on the business and being exposed to the business and also owning Bitcoin. Because the reason being is that we are going through, and when we talk about the black hole, I think about the expansion of the black hole as the monetization event of the asset.
Mm-hmm.
And that we are going through this period of time where many other things are going to get demonetized and Bitcoin is going to get fully monetized. And what I mean by that is that right now, a bunch of these other asset classes are getting a monetary premium assigned to them because global inflation is so insidious and so broad and so large. And so it's better to own your house than it is to hold cash. Or it's better to own bonds or stocks than it is to hold cash. And if you look, historically, that's not really how, mature, harder moneyed economies functioned. And we're going to get the pushback and say, well, but this economy is so much better than every other economy ever in human history. And we can debate that. But I think that what's important is to understand is that the monetary premium that's been spread across all of these other asset classes are going to get pulled into Bitcoin over some period of reasonable time. And it's just because, imagine that you have a newborn today and you want to save for their college education. What do you recommend buying for the next 18 years before that newborn is ready to go off to college?
I mean, it depends on the person. I mean, I know what I would do, but I know I'd advise my brother. And there's slightly different things. What I would do, I'm a Bitcoiner. I just fucking buy Bitcoin. I know in 18 years, I don't have to put as much by. I know, say you have to save $200,000 for college education, right? You've actually got to save more, because in 18 years' time, if you have continual debasement of a 2 to 5% a year, I don't know what that works out. Does that work out at 300,000? Does that work out at 400,000? But you're constantly chasing. Whereas I know if I put $200,000 of Bitcoin by now, I'm going to have a surplus.
Exactly.
But if it's my brother, I'd probably go, I don't want to give you wrong advice in case something goes wrong. Go a third Bitcoin, go a third gold, go a third cash. But I know what I do.
And this is the point, is that what Bitcoin does is it lets individuals extend their time preference horizon with a higher degree of certainty than anything else available to them today.
That's because around the event horizon, we have time dilation.
Exactly. Time plays differently in Bitcoin world than it does in the rest of the world. And that's by design. That's because we have proof of work and the difficulty adjustment allowing for the time dilation to take place as the center of mass continues to grow. And so with each additional cycle, each round of expansion of that center of mass, more of the monetization across the rest of the world's assets get pulled in, and the opportunity to pull in the next incremental asset goes up.
Collapsing in on themselves into the black hole. Okay, so what have we swallowed up so fast? First, it was energy you told me the other night. You think?
I mean, I think that right now, Bitcoin mining represents a fundamentally transformative revenue stream for energy markets that has never been available before. So it's a full-blown 0 to 1 innovation in power markets. So, if you were running power markets over the last, 30, 40 years, you've spent all of your time focused on cost management. Nobody has spent time thinking about the revenue side of their business or innovating on the revenue side. You've introduced some peak and off-peak concepts into some of these markets. And the goal of that was to get households to run their dryers at night, not during the day. That was the extent of the innovation there, was to try to, slowly nudge people's behavior to get them to do their appliance usage overnight. What that didn't account for was the ability to have, fully dispatchable multi-100 megawatt loads being able to come on and off of an energy system in maybe not quite real-time response, but pretty fucking close. So there's this huge, huge change in what does it mean to be a large-scale energy customer, and what does that mean for the markets that those customers are participating in. So, imagine waking up and figuring out that there's another 20 or 30% revenue in your energy system without having to invest another dollar of CapEx. Groundbreaking change. And we haven't seen that get fully priced across the spectrum yet. So number one is that Bitcoin is going to buy more energy over the coming decades, and that's going to be an incredible benefit for individuals and for the climate and the environment and all of these things. Bitcoin mining is an enormous positive sum sector of the economy.
Tell me, do you walk into energy companies who kind of have no real or limited understanding of Bitcoin, sit in front of them, give them a presentation of this subject, and watch their brains kind of explode? Have you had those reactions?
Over the last 3-4 years, absolutely. So there's one interaction that was great. Was we went in and we walked them through how we want to be a customer. Right? I walk into an energy company. The first thing I tell them is I want to be the best customer you've ever had. I don't want to introduce any strain to the system. I want to buy your least valuable hours. I want to do it really cheaply, but I'm willing to work with you along every other vector other than price. That's it.
And you can turn me on and off.
You tell me on, off, up, down, half, full, whatever. That's all priceable.
I mean, that is the best customer they could possibly ask for.
Yes, exactly.
I'm trying to think of an analogy for any other industry where you would have such an amazing customer.
We try to make it really easy. Oh, and we don't need all these other things, all these other, redundancy. Imagine Facebook showing up and saying, we want to build a 100 megawatt data center. that really means 300 megawatts of infrastructure because they want full uptime and they want to do it with solar and they want to do all these other, and it just becomes this like total, and they want to never pay taxes for the next 15 years because they need to be incentivized because 10 other places are competing for them. Whereas we want to go to a community that does not have a customer like us. We want to be the biggest buyer of energy in your market because nobody else has chosen to go there because, you know what we don't need to do? We don't need to be 15 feet from the interstate and be on a major shipping hub. We don't need a massive amount of land. We're able to do this on a much smaller footprint than most other businesses. We're able to we solve all of these traditional hard to manage concepts. We don't introduce strain. We're not a pain in the ass. We're pretty helpful. We're pretty useful. And we just want to be a benefit to your environment. Like this is the point, is that we care so much about price that we're willing to work with you on every single other factor.
And is it like just sign? Can you sign up now, please?
It's a little more complicated than that. So
do they feel like they're being tricked or something?
Yes. So that's exactly right. So we show up and we walk them through kind of what our power purchase model looks like and how we want to interact with you. And they're like, but can you actually do it? Like, does this actually work? Yeah, we can show you operating data. And this isn't like a hypothetical thing. This is like what is already happening at large scale today. We just want to grow this massively. And we being our entire industry. And so, this is an incredibly exciting time when I think we're seeing some of the large energy, project developers starting to get hip to this. We're starting to see utilities understand this. I think that we're going to wake up in 5 to 10 years and every single town is going to have Bitcoin mining in it to some degree as a load balancer for their energy system. And it's good, so there's sort of two ways to think about it, right? Like we're used to thinking of energy as this like scarce resource. When really the scarce resource is our ability to think aggressively about bringing low cost, reliable and renewable power to individuals. Like it's our will to build this that is the scarce resource. Like we're not running out of energy.
Are there any losers in this? Any businesses being destroyed?
The challenge that could come from some of this is around it's a timing issue. So the lag between new Bitcoin miners wanting to come to a neighborhood near you and the energy infrastructure backend catching up to the increased demand. So there's going to be the miners are more nimble than building a new power plant. And so there's going to be some push and some pull, but I think over time that's going to normalize, really significantly as we see further commoditization of mining hardware. We're going to see, further growth and cost of capital dropping for some of these mining operations. So the ability to have, a truly flexible load consumer is going to increase. So, imagine we fast forward, 20 years, maybe the Bitcoin mine is only running 25 or 30% of the week, just when needed to balance, rather than needing to hit like 80 or 90% uptime in order to amortize and pay off those servers. The server costs have come down, the cost of capital has come down, the cost of energy has come down, and so it becomes this totally opportunistic layer of the energy stack where the revenue that gets put back to the utilities and to the energy generation folks just means that they're able to continuously invest in better and higher quality service, higher environmental stewardship, and they're able to actually have the revenues to improve the systems rather than wait for government subsidies to come along and save them, or the public dollars needed to upgrade things. They actually have a profitable business that can invest in the improvement of services rather than some of these other sort of less market driven solutions.
What about with money? If we had a dollar stable coin on the Lightning Network, my assumption with that is that becomes a real significant problem for Visa and MasterCard on debit, not so much on credit, because I don't believe we have a decentralized credit on the Lightning Network yet. Someone may invent something. We have some centralized possibilities with some of the entities who work in Bitcoin finance right now. But stablecoins have become very popular globally, especially in developing markets. mainly operating on alternative protocols. But if we had a dollar stablecoin on the Lightning Network, and I know Jack Mallers is doing something kind of outside of it, on top of it, but like an actual stablecoin natively within the Lightning Network, all those fees which MasterCard and Visa take from the retailers, that percentage or whatever it is,
Griid and whatever.
yeah, they are destroyed. They're gone.
Mm-hmm.
That might even that will lead to two things: either a lower price for the consumer, or more revenue for the retailer. But either way, you've removed that percentage. It doesn't exist anymore.
Well, I guess I'm sometimes confused why we make Western Union the boogeyman and not Visa and MasterCard, right? Like, what's the difference between 13 or 30% or 3% fees? It's all rent-seeking extraction, right? You're a natural monopoly on these payment processors. You've inserted yourself into the transaction cycle, and at the end of the day, the individual is paying the price for that. So why would a technology upgrade not fundamentally disrupt you and remove you and strip the cost out of the structure?
Yeah. I mean, look, they provided a service. It's a useful service. It's useful for me coming here to the US that I don't need to exchange money. I can, on my phone, double click and I can pay. That is a useful service, and there's a charge for that. They've just been out. I just think they've been out innovated.
Exactly, and that's the thing, is that technology is fundamentally deflationary.
It's like the end of Fight Club. If you haven't, by the way, if anyone listening to this hasn't seen that film, go watch that fucking film.
It's really good.
But it's the end of Fight Club.
Mm-hmm.
It's blowing up of the
banks.
Of the banks.
Yeah.
Well, the payment processes.
The destruction of consumer credit.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not, because I still think you have credit. Consumer credit, I think, is different from debit. So debit is just the payment process.
Yes.
But credit is a different. If I don't have credit, sometimes I want to buy things when I don't have it.
All dollars are credit.
You know what I mean, though? There's a slight difference. Like debit is like the money I have, let me pay for something.
Yes.
Come from my bank account. Credit is the money I don't have, I'll pay it at the end of the month.
Mm-hmm.
Incentivized. Which you can gain in certain ways. But what I'm saying is it at least gets rid of the debit part.
Yes.
Now, hopefully, if you're owning Bitcoin, you won't need credit because you've been financially responsible. And
that's the goal, is that the removal, we talked about the butterfly effect. I think credit cards are a huge contributor to the butterfly effect. They're incredibly useful in a fiat environment. You mean I get to borrow the money for free for 30 days? Who wouldn't take that deal?
And you actually pay me now?
Exactly, yeah. And you give me whatever cash back or all these other programs.
I get 4 flights a year for free just for using your free 30 days credit.
And so what that says to me is that they're generating revenue somewhere else within the system, looking at the retailer fee that ultimately I'm ending up paying anyway.
Yeah. And
then the other piece is that there's some significant percentage of folks who don't pay their bill at the end of the month. They borrow it for longer than 30 days and get charged 14.5% on that money until they pay it back.
Or never pay it back and stuck in that cycle.
That's the other option.
What about the destruction of the banks themselves? Will I need a bank account in 15 years, 20 years?
I don't think you'll need a bank account, but I think that banking services are ultimately just it's a service. I think that.
But anyone can provide them. Cash App can provide them.
And credit unions have been thriving for a long time. Local merchant and regional banks. I think that it's I think that the attempt to have banks achieve network effects is really sort of the challenge, and that what Bitcoin does is it breaks the banking network effect. It doesn't remove the need for banking services. Yeah.
Interestingly, I haven't used a high street bank now for quite some time because, one, I lost one. The known story of Lloyd's closing down my bank account, you motherfuckers. And you can just download an app and have a bank account and a card available in minutes now. So you've got these neobanks, which is like the next step forward. But in terms of what I actually use my neobank for, there are direct debits, payments.
Yeah.
But if you move to a Bitcoin wallet I can spend money. I wonder if you can get to the point of direct debits. That's a bit more difficult. I guess regular payments.
There's ways to do it. I mean, I think that ultimately software just replaces these things over time, and that they'll be the great part about Bitcoin being a protocol is you can plug it into a bunch of different kind of software front ends, and the innovation can happen at the software layer, and the protocol can function exactly the way you expect.
So banks die, and you just have providers of financial services. So why will we need a central bank then? We won't.
We won't. So I mean, the central bank's core has a few core functions. They tell you that the core function is full employment and stable prices. That's what they will tell you that the dual mandate is. That's what your economics textbook will say to you. But it also provides other, especially on the dollar side, it provides other services that are related to dollar hegemony, which are things like settlement assurances. So Switzerland's account at the U.S. Fed and England's account at the U.S. Fed. The reason why they feel comfortable doing business with each other via the U.S. Fed is because of dollar hegemony in that environment, and the central bank and Fedwire as a facilitating mechanism for settlement, which Bitcoin solves settlement.
Can you see a scenario whereby we have a move back to the era of free banking? I discussed this with Lynn Alden recently, whereby perhaps we have some issuance of some form of currency which Bitcoin backs.
I mean, any free market solution that people want to engage in, I think over time will use Bitcoin to engage in an experiment with. I think it's a function of adoption, not a function of experimentation. So I think we could certainly see attempts to focus on that. I think we could definitely, if we're able to achieve, what I think is in the works on Lightning and on Taro and on some of these other more expressive Bitcoin-based environments, I think we'll see significant experimentation there, which is exciting, but ultimately may not be the most interesting use of Bitcoin.
What about governance and politics and this way we govern ourselves? How do you think that changes? I've not really heard you talk too much about this.
I am firmly in the camp that that any economy and any country and any group of loosely organized people are really just the sum of the individuals. And so I think that the ability for individuals to engage with each other on an opt-in basis is really the foundational component. So I think a lot about what we've gotten right in America, and some of what we maybe have gotten wrong. I think that we largely got it right around the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, 14th Amendment. Are all really, really, really critically strong pieces of governance infrastructure, and layered on top of that it's very, very difficult to change. And so similar to Bitcoin,
like consensus.
Exactly. So similar to Bitcoin, the US government and the framers of the Constitution did an incredible job designing a system that is A, very strong from its foundational components, and B, very hard to change. And so those, from a governance standpoint, that means that we've kind of offloaded a lot of the next level governance to higher layers of interaction. So, maybe that's a local or a state constitution that gets amended or that gets changed more easily because there's a more homogenous population, from an ideological perspective in a state or in a community, but also it means that the judicial system holds a really significant lever over how the hard to change things get interpreted. We're seeing a lot of that, more recently. Mm-hmm. So these layers of foundational components and difficulty to move them is really at the heart of why the American system is thought of so highly and has been so successful to date. If you look at the places where we've had challenges, it's really around the interpretation layers. It's not around the fundamental layers.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong here. I've read the Constitution through once. I've not really read all the Federalist Papers I mentioned to you the other day. I've got them open. I'm about to start on them. Did they address the size of the state in that? Because this appears to me to be the biggest problem, is that the state has grown so so fucking big. Who was it yesterday? Was it Peter Doyle?
Yeah.
Who said 40%
let me pull it up.
yeah, it was something like 40% of all tax dollars go towards funding the state, or 40% of GDP.
It was the spending to GDP ratio is 40%.
Mm-hmm. So this is the fundamental problem with GDP, the calculation.
Just get back one step. I think I remember Jameson Lopp tweeting something once when tax was first introduced, and it was a 1% taxation, and I can't remember what for, but I remember the introduction of it. Him showing that introduction. You're now at the point where the state's grown and grown and grown and grown. I don't know if this is something they didn't consider or they considered, but it seems to be the size of the state was one bit that's been missing from the Constitution. That might have been helpful.
Yeah, I think we just don't have a lot of evidence that the government is that good at solving many of these problems. And I think, it's the classic meme of I'm new to Bitcoin and I'm here to fix it. I think that's kind of how the government shows up to most things. I'm new to this new thing and I'm here to fix it for you. We're going to regulate it and then it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Or we're going to tax it and now everything's going to be great. And I just don't think we have a lot of evidence that's what happens. And I think that there's sort of two insidious forces at work. One is that the government, capital, the federal government, but the state governments, to some degree as well. Once they get power, they don't give it back. They're very, what percentage of Americans, think that the Patriot Act was a great idea today? It's not that many, but that's never going away. Those surveillance capabilities, those privacy protections are gone. And it's going to take a long time to approximate getting them back. And the way that we'll get them back is through asymmetric cryptography, not through the government giving us permission to have our privacy back. So there's this creep component to it. But then the other is that, well, there's three, I guess. The second is that the government is very bad as a capital allocator. And so a dollar that the government spends doesn't go nearly as far as the dollar that private enterprise spends.
Because it lacks competition?
There's lots of structural
employs
reasons. Morons? Yeah. So, there's a talent problem. There's a competition problem. There's an incentive problem,
accountability problem.
Well, Congress, let's say Congress is going to go sign $1 trillion spending bill, and there's government contracts that are part of that. There's an intense competition, state by state, vote by vote, to get that contract allocated to your state, regardless of the quality of the product and regardless of the pricing mechanism. There's a huge incentive for a representative or a congressperson or a senator to have the government contract awarded to a business in their state so they can maintain their ability to get reelected. So the incentive structure is just immediately broken. So we need to go to some kind of blind bidding system or something, more reasonable from a capital allocation perspective, not just, hey, I don't care the quality of the product. You need to award this contract to my state or I'm not going to vote for it. And when you need a simple majority to pass something, the practice of buying votes with the allocation of pork in the barrel becomes the guiding principle rather than delivering the best outcome for the American people.
So perhaps with Bitcoin, it's a forcing function for the state to become better capital allocators.
Bitcoin is just a de facto austerity measure.
Yeah.
Right. So if you can't print more of it, you don't get to play games with the money.
People who hold as a Bitcoin right now are paying tax on their Bitcoin. Not everyone, I assume, but plenty of people are. And I don't see that being eliminated for now. So there becomes a scenario where potentially there's a transition where the dollar dies, the government is getting tax receipts in Bitcoin, but their ability to grow the state or fund state operations is becoming limited because the dollar's dying. They can't print it, but they do have this Bitcoin. So then they have to allocate it and they have to budget.
Exactly.
And they can't tax too high because if you tax too high, people will move jurisdiction. So it is a forced austerity.
And just, we can look at the natural example in France recently where they introduced that millionaires tax. Like 70% of the people left the jurisdiction. And it was like this idea that people don't really vote with their feet. give them a good enough reason to, and they will.
Of course.
And I don't take the direct approach that like I think the dollar is like doomed and Bitcoin is here to eat the dollar overnight. Like I think that moving towards a harder monetary system over time is a valuable way to engage with this stuff, and that fundamentally this is just a technology improvement around how individuals can relate to each other on an opt-in basis. And so over time, I'm just going to continue to vote with my paycheck and say I don't want dollars. I'd rather have Bitcoin. And I think that that's the mechanism by which, a peaceful and prosperous transition can happen. Is just, people make, more people own stocks than own dollars today. And so I think in the future, we just see the same dynamic where more people own Bitcoin than dollars today. And eventually that change can happen. But there's, it's not like we've got this like 1,000-year history of a single currency governing the world. We've got monetary transitions and reserve currency transitions time and time again that we can point to. And some of them come with incredible unlocking of innovation and opportunity. And some of them come with challenges to the country of origin from the prior regime. And so it's a fluid and dynamic process that I think we're in this really exciting moment of a monetization event in a new asset.
Some dinner you missed, by the way, Danny.
It sounds like it.
Danny, anything you want to ask?
The only thing I was thinking is, so whenever we speak to anyone on like macro stuff, they say this like next decade is going to be like high energy prices. What impact will that have on mining?
Yeah, I think that energy markets are definitely something that miners think broadly about and are exposed to. I think, like most things, the harder the environment, the more innovation gets rewarded. And so the ability to bring more flexible and aggressive business models to market, the ability to have, vertical integration available, I think, the folks who have low cost of capital and scale are probably going to be disproportionately rewarded in a more challenging market environment because they're able to drive down the marginal cost. They're able to be, not just miners, but capital allocators within the context of these markets. So I think that, it's going to reward it's a barbell, right? It's going to reward the scale players, the large ones who are able to strike economies of scale driven deals and creative and flexibility. It's also going to reward the very small guys who are able to find, innovations that don't scale. So maybe it's the flared gas guys, maybe it's the ability to buy a distressed wellhead, or maybe it's the ability to enter into an unusual situation that doesn't grow to 5 megawatts or 10 megawatts or 100 megawatts, but for 1 or 2 megawatts, that's a nice small business.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I'm looking forward to whatever the next unknown is. I'm intrigued to see what we eat next. Do you want to tell anyone anything about Griid before we?
We're Griid. We mine Bitcoin. I'm Harry from Griid.
I have the most beautiful voice in Bitcoin.
As long as you keep letting me talk, I'll keep talking. I have to say, my mom loves your show.
Well, I love your mother. And I appreciate her being a fan of the show. I seem to have like a few mothers who like the show. Who was it? Dylan Leclerc's mom?
Yeah.
She likes the show. Somebody's 94-year-old mother found the show on Facebook. Told grandmother told them, I found this Bitcoin show. It's like, yeah, that's my buddy. I can't remember who that was. What Bitcoin Did is the favorite podcast of Bitcoin mothers around the world.
Most important demographic.
Yeah. Man, I love you.
I love you too.
Harry, thank you so much. How do people follow you?
On Twitter, Harry_Sudock. My DMs are open. I accept resumes. Just keep working on Bitcoin.
Someone needs to take this idea and run with it. It feels like a Toma.
It does feel like a Toma article.
Yeah, it feels like a Toma article. I'm going to forward this on to him, see if he wants to. He did the Bitcoin brain.
Oh,
yeah.
This is so, and I'll say it on like Gigi is my like Bitcoin big brain spirit animal in all of this.
Uh-huh.
I think he's so brilliant, and I think he's such an important thinker. Him and Alan Farrington on Bitcoin is Venice. Those are the two people who, when they write stuff, Like I cancel meetings to go read it.
I'm with you on both of those. All right, dude. Look, keep crushing. Hopefully, I'll see you soon, man. Not sure when. Not sure where.
Enjoy Nashville.
Yes, brother. Shame you can't. Can you come with us?
I wish. I'm in Austin next week.
Can you come on the way?
We'll talk about it.
Okay. All right, take care, brother.
Thanks.